All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm not one of the highlighted people on the screen, but I'm down on probably your right-hand corner. My name is Tylo. I am the UNR Study Abroad Outreach Coordinator here at USAC. So really quickly, I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to have a brief introductory presentation just to show you guys a little bit more about USAC. So we'll get started with that. So we are the University Studies Abroad Consortium. We're located here on UNR's campus. We currently operate over 50 programs in 27 countries. We offer immersive experiences not only in the semester, but also during the summer, year-long, as well as a few January programs. And we also help students not only study abroad, but intern, volunteer, participate in cultural experiences and immersive experiences. So when students study abroad with us, they're not just going to courses all day long. They have the opportunity to really immerse themselves in the population of the people that they're studying with and around every single day. Many of our courses focus on cultural immersion. So students will have the opportunity to take cuisine courses, surfing courses, dance lessons. They have the opportunity for service learning with maybe underrepresented communities. And a variety of other opportunities for them. So currently, as I mentioned, we offer programs in over 27 countries on 4 different continents. So for UNR students, this is a really amazing way for them to be able to experience a new culture, to connect maybe with their own culture and explore their identity. Maybe if they're a family of immigrants, or maybe several generations back, they have family that go to different countries. They can explore their heritage. So to get started, I'm going to introduce our panel to you guys. So our moderator is Justice Watt. He's the USAC Senior Academic Affairs Coordinator. He has been with USAC for several years now. His primary work involves academic management and development with a particular focus on administering the USAC's Visiting Professor program, our new and improved internships program, and our curriculum integration efforts. Justice also studied abroad and did research abroad in Kyoto and Tokyo, Japan in 2011 and 2018. Our first panelist is Dr. Bohm. She's a professor with a dual enrollment or appointment to the departments of anthropology and gender, race, and identity. Her focus, she has been partnered with USAC, or has partnered in the past as a visiting professor, where she taught courses in Alicante and San Sebastian, Spain in the summers of 2013 and 2016. She's a Carnegie Andrew Fellow and is currently on research leave through UNR from 2021 to 2023, where she's conducting critical research on immigration detention and growing social movements. So definitely we are really excited to have her on this panel to talk about her experience, not only with USAC, but her important research. Our second panelist is Dr. Shapiro, an associate professor in the Department of History. He focuses his efforts and research on East Asian history. Dr. Shapiro partnered with USAC as a visiting professor to Shanghai, China in the spring semester of 2017. Currently, his research focuses on the histories of disease in a comparative context. He's conducted field work not only in China, but also Japan and Taiwan. So he has a lot of great experience in East Asia. He's also taught at several universities, extremely distinguished professor, and we are extremely honored to have him as a panelist as well. And last but not least, our third panelist, Dr. Stiles, a professor of the anthropology department. Dr. Stiles taught with us in Heredia, Costa Rica, where she taught the course Gender and Culture in Latin America. She has also done program evaluations specifically for our USAC program in Chiang Mai, Thailand. Dr. Stiles is currently conducting research in northern Utah, where she's exploring the Mormon experience with their connection to spirits and the spirit world. And she's also conducted field research, in Tanzania. So again, we're extremely grateful to have Dr. Stiles here. And this is our panel. So now I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I will hand it over to Justice, who will begin with the questions for the panelists.
Thank you, Tylo, and thank you very much to our wonderful panelists for being here today. To To begin, I was hoping that each of you could tell me a little bit or tell us a little bit about your experience teaching abroad, and maybe the classes you taught, and what was your fondest memory of teaching abroad with USAC?
I'll start, I guess. I think I taught with USAC most recently, listening to your bios. I taught in the summer program in Heredia, Costa Rica in 2019, so just pre-pandemic. And as Tyler mentioned in my bio, I taught a class called Gender and Culture with a focus on Latin America, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was a very small class. I think I had 4 or 5 students. University was fantastic. The students were amazing. I'm just going to come and gush about how much I love teaching for USAC. It was absolutely wonderful. The students were fantastic. It was a very kind of an intimate classroom experience because we met every day for 3 weeks. I think it was a 3-week program. And so I was in the classroom with the students every morning from about 8 a.m. till 12 p.m. We got to know each other very well. We really got to engage deeply with the material. And I think the students got to connect a lot of what we were learning to their experiences in living in Costa Rica. So it was really wonderful. We did some outreach activities to women's rights organizations in the region, which was great. I participated in all the USAC activities that were arranged for the students. I was there with my kids and one of our grad students who came to babysit my kids, and we did all the activities. We went to the roller skating socials, we went to the weekend field trip, so we just kind of threw ourselves into it, and it was just a fantastic experience. And I think the students, given how good their final papers were, they really learned something as well.
Yeah, I have a similar take on the experience that it's hard to, I think you asked about our most enjoyable or most rewarding aspect of it, but I think for me, so I taught in, as Tyler mentioned, in Alicante, 2 different programs in Spain, in Alicante, and then in Donostia or San Sebastian, which is in Basque Country in Spain also. I taught gender and migration when I was in Alicante the first time I went, and then I taught a gender cross cultures class when I was in San Sebastian. And I would say that again, it's hard to narrow down my favorite part of being there, but the people were amazing. The students, the USAC staff, the people in the local communities where we were. Also, I think you cannot go to Spain without raving about the food. It's just incredible. And so that is something memorable for me. And I think also just the experience of being, because I think all of us on the panel have done research internationally at different times, and that can be, especially, I don't know, historians might have a different take on this, but as anthropologists, that can be a pretty, sometimes it can be really challenging work, but this was so easy and fun and engaging. And, I really just had an excellent experience. And I also was able to structure the class in a way that students were engaging with the local community. We met with representatives from NGOs related to the topic. Students were doing fieldwork fieldwork kinds of exercises that I can talk about more if there's time. But yes, overall, just an amazing experience. And I actually had applied to go again. We were going to find out that it would be that summer that we went into the pandemic and shut down. So unfortunately that did not happen, but hopefully someday again, I will be able to collaborate with USAC.
I want to second and third what my colleagues, Professor Stiles and Professor Boehm said. Professor Stiles mentioned outreach. This is one of the things that really surprised me positively about my experience in Shanghai, is how open organizations were to hosting students. And these are organizations that maybe NGOs working for the Shanghai government or international businesses that generally don't have time for such things. The door was, we got the green light in so many ways. We We met with high-level environmental scientists. We spent a day at Bloomberg headquarters in Shanghai, where just to sit at a Bloomberg terminal, you have to pay like $1 million. And the screenshots I took from that day, I still use in my lectures because we were given access. So that was great. And I think in what Professor Boehm said about interacting with the community, in Shanghai, the other wonderful surprise was how well organized it was. My only regret is that I didn't do this earlier. And I'll tell you why. It's sort of embarrassing. Like my colleagues and many of the participants today, I've traveled my entire life. And so I thought, oh, USAC, well, that's, I already know how to travel. I don't need that. But when I did it, I thought, oh my gosh, they're so well organized. Not only academically, the courses were well organized, everything we needed from digital stuff in the classroom to textbooks. It was so well organized. I really wish I'd done this 10 years ago. And yeah, so I know my colleagues feel this also. You shouldn't think twice about doing this or not. It could very well be the most rewarding aspect of your education, and not doing it not doing it, I think you're really missing something. You're really missing something. And even you might think to yourself, well, why would I go to China or Brazil? I'm not going to work in international things. Well, that doesn't matter. It really simply gives you new types of skills and new types of insights that you cannot get any other way.
Thank you so much for those enlightening anecdotes about your time abroad. It sounds like all of you had a very fruitful experience. Now, my next question is, what were some of the challenges that you faced while teaching abroad?
I honestly didn't have any challenges. I'll be frank with you. I mean, I think that yeah, no, I really didn't. I think that except maybe to echo Dr. Shapiro and say that I wish I had done it earlier. I don't know if that's a challenge or not. But I think I will say one thing that, and this is not to criticize other programs, but I did meet some faculty members who were teaching with other study abroad programs, not organized through USAC. And I know that there were some struggles that were happening in those programs with, students or faculty or whatever it may be. And that just wasn't the case with the USAC programs because there's such great staff on site. The model, I think, is structured in a way that it really ensures success for everyone all around.
I would like to second that. I didn't have any problems. The office was so well organized, but I'll mention a student problem. I remember my first week in class, a really bright student from out east left his backpack in a taxi after a night of partying. And he told me that. I just thought to myself, well, your backpack is gone and so is your computer. And I just, looked at him like, well, this is a growing experience for you. But then he went to the resident director, who was so omnicompetent, and she got on the phone, and within 6 hours, the backpack had been returned. She figured out which taxi company, they found the driver. He's like, oh yes, I've been holding this, hoping I could return it. So I was endlessly amazed at how resourceful and capable the office there was in helping students navigate their challenges.
Yeah, I'll agree. The only challenge I had was trying to figure out how to use the Costa Rican shower head. So it was a very complicated mechanism to adjust the temperature of the water on the shower head. But so that was just me, user error. But and just struggling with childcare because I thought my husband was coming with me until a week before we were supposed to leave, and then he suddenly couldn't come. So I had to very frantically enlist a graduate student to come as a babysitter, but that is not a USAC problem. Yeah, I will echo what my colleagues are saying, is that it was unbelievably well organized, and the staff in Costa Rica, the resident director, were just incredible. So every problem, there were no problems. It was just an absolute joy from the moment I arrived at 11:30 at night with small children. Someone was there meeting me at the airport, taking me to this wonderful apartment that USAC had found. It was just, it was just fantastic. No, there were no USAC related challenges. And I should, a few years before that, I visited as just a, kind of program evaluator, the wonderful program in Chiang Mai, Thailand. And it was, that time I was just there for a week. I wasn't teaching. I was just with a group of faculty visiting the program, but that was also just an amazing, I mean, I just felt so lucky that I was asked to go on that trip. I couldn't believe my good fortune. It was just such a fantastic trip and so well organized. And the students in that program were having an incredible time too. So yeah, the only challenge is it was too short and I want to go back again. Like Debbie, I'd also applied to go again, the same pre-pandemic. So I know the visiting professor program is on hold, but hopefully we'll be selected again.
Knock on wood.
Yes.
I'd like to also say USAC has an outstanding reputation among universities abroad. And this really is important. I'll give you a great example. I remember halfway through the semester in Shanghai, I got a call from the graduate school at Shanghai University. And they said, would you set up a meeting with some of your students? And we talked about it. It turns out they wanted to offer our students money to come do graduate work in Shanghai. And you're undergraduates, and you'll find this out soon enough. When you go to grad school, especially for master's programs, getting money is very difficult. Maybe you'll get money for a doctoral program, but it's tough. But here was Shanghai University, one of the leading universities in the world. It wasn't literally sitting on the desk, but it was on the computer. There's a button needed to be pressed and the money was going to be opened up and our students could matriculate there as graduate students. So the outstanding work does translate into strong reputation, and this translates into opportunities, which is so important for your future. USAC can help open doors for you in a very meaningful way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those glowing endorsements of USAC. We're very happy to hear that your experience was so challenge-free. But Dr. Shapiro, you did anticipate my next question when you're talking about student challenges. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about some of the challenges maybe that you saw your students face studying abroad and maybe how they overcame those.
I'd like to hear from my colleagues, the backpack episode, but overall, what was so helpful to the students was not only USAC, but their host, the community of students from Shanghai University were also incredibly open and helpful. And very quickly, the students came to master the infrastructure, the subway, traveling around the country. I was very impressed at how quickly people mastered this. And this isn't really answering your question, but I will segue to one of my favorite things to do in Shanghai was exactly to ride the subway, because I'm an impatient person. I don't like to wait. And in Shanghai, you don't wait. The subways, every 3 minutes there's a subway, and those subways are cleaner than my office that I'm sitting in right now. So yes, so I didn't actually, the students actually really didn't have problems. They really thrived, and many of them did create new opportunities for them through internships at NGOs. One student ended up staying on with Bloomberg, and now he does international business. And so they seemed very understanding that this was a great chance not only to learn Chinese and grow, but also to find their next opportunity.
Yeah, for me, I don't remember the students having any particular issues. I think they were all in the Costa Rica program. They were all doing homestays. They were all living with families, which is wonderful. Highly recommend that if it's a possibility. And so I think I remember talking with the students in some of our first days that just figuring out how to get from their neighborhood to campus was just the first couple of days. It was a little bit, can I walk? Is it, kind of judging the time and public transportation, figuring public transportation out was a little bit challenging the first couple of days, but then there were no issues. And then I think navigating schedules with, just like living with any household, right? Just figuring out how your schedule as a student, as a young person who wants to be social and go out at night, kind of meshing the schedules with the family schedule of the homestays they were living in was just, it wasn't really a problem. It was just a matter of kind of, adjusting to that. But I think once those little issues were ironed out at the beginning, I don't recall any serious problem. One student did go, she got the flu, I think. And so, but USAC took very good care of her and, took her to urgent care and she recovered very quickly. But that was, and she was very happy, I think, with how well she was taken care of. She certainly didn't feel like she had to kind of navigate medical system of a new country she'd never visited before on her own. The USAC staff really helped her with that.
Yeah, I would say the challenges that I saw that students had were, kind of, I guess they might have been challenging, but they're also part of what becomes the benefit of studying abroad and being in another setting for a stretch of time. So sometimes language barriers, were challenging to students, but again, they were there to learn the language. So that was also something, a chance to grow and to kind of expand in their studies of the language. In most cases, I think, well, I guess not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, they had done some language study beforehand. But of course, when you're in a country and immersed in the language, it's a different kind of learning experience and a much richer one altogether. And then I think some of the kind of challenges that, again, are common in any kind of experience like that, homesickness. I'm thinking of, Alicante has some kind of famous, it has a kind of famous club scene. I did not partake in this, but I know the students did. And, sometimes there's just this kind of, there's sort of growing pains, I guess, that come with independence and increasing independence. But no, those were positive things, I think, overall. So, and yeah, I think we did have some students, I'm trying to remember, in some of the settings where, in some cases where they became ill, not anything serious, but they might have gotten a stomach bug or something like that. And then USAC was there to provide that support for any kind of healthcare needs and those kinds of things. So I would say that the challenges are in many ways an important part of, within reason, not that you want to have a lot of challenges, but I think that they're the challenges any of us face when we go to a new place and, may not be familiar with the setting, but it also ends up being very rewarding in the end.
Well, sticking with the topic of student experience, did you see any personal or academic growth from students that you might not have expected in a university setting here in the United States?
Yeah, I will just follow up with, I'm thinking of a couple different students I've stayed in touch with, actually. And one in particular I'm thinking of ended up going on to nursing school, and she got in touch with me several years after USAC, because she was in the middle of her undergraduate studies when she went, and said how much study abroad and the course had contributed to her interest in this field, her way of thinking about health issues and healthcare, especially cross-culturally and in a global setting. So, that's just one example, but I think that we likely don't hear from all of the students who have similar ways that their study abroad has impacted their future trajectory. And they may not, that may be a connection that isn't even made for years to come. But I think, my own experience, I actually did a study abroad program when I was in college in France. And now thinking back, I didn't realize kind of the path that it would put me on in terms of becoming an anthropologist, because that was not something I studied until graduate school. So.
I'd like to say, I think language acquisition is often a surprising and very empowering thing. It's one of those things that until you've done it, it seems undoable. It seems impossible, almost like a fantasy. But then you see students very quickly gain competence and their ability to communicate. And once that happens, I think that really opens up so many other vistas. Because once you can learn a language, you think, well, I basically can do anything. So I think the language aspect is very empowering to students. That's something I've observed many, many times.
Yeah, and I think just, I agree with everything Debbie and Hugh were saying. I'd also say that it just that feeling of confidence and independence that I can do this. One wonderful student I had who I did stay in touch with hadn't traveled out of the country before. That's doing the study abroad was kind of not super last minute, but kind of, well, I guess I'll just do this. And the student hadn't been particularly interested in Latin America but hadn't studied Spanish yet, but had started when she was there and got so much out of the experience that as soon as she came back, she reapplied to USAC to do another longer study abroad program, which I thought was just wonderful. So yeah, and I think just, for a lot of the students, just seeing that growth, that I can do this, especially for students who hadn't maybe lived abroad or traveled abroad before, that this is absolutely doable and possible, and seeing that, that confidence build is great. Yeah, like Debbie, I studied abroad as an undergrad as well. In Jerusalem, and it was not nearly as well organized as USAC, I will tell, the program that I was on, but it was still, very rewarding. But I think, yeah, it was very formative for me at that young age, and it's great to see other students growing in the same way.
I'd like, do you mind, Justice, if I bring up a different issue?
Not at all.
It regards security and safety. I think maybe not just students, but also parents see the world as an increasingly hazardous place, a dangerous place. I want to say that, well, in the case of China, but also Japan and Korea, all of East Asia, it's probably some of the safest places to live in the world. I actually feel safer in a large Asian city than I do in the United States. And I don't say that criticizing the United States, it's just a fact. I think Tokyo, for example, the largest city in the world, is literally, by all indices, the safest place to live. And USAC, I think, is extremely conscientious in choosing its sites. If USAC has a program, it's been vetted very carefully. There's no way that USAC is going to allow anything bad to happen to anyone, not once. That's the attitude. And so I think there's a very high degree of security and safety in these environments that people, I think, in the United States don't realize. So that's something I'd like to say, that one, living abroad is often much safer than one realizes, but USAC in particular goes out of its way to only go into areas that are 100% safe for the participants.
Yeah, that's very true. We do take student health and safety as our #1 priority all the time. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Now, thinking about teaching abroad, do any of you notice any particular differences in your teaching style or your approach to teaching in an international environment as opposed to back home?
Can go if, did Erin, did you just?
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that well, again, from an anthropological perspective, I think, we try to bring fieldwork experience and those kinds of things into the classroom, I think, in any setting, but obviously a study abroad provides so many more opportunities. And also, I think my class was similar to Dr. Stiles in that it was, a smaller class than I teach typically at the university. So I had a chance to get to know students much better and could kind of work with them to think about what kinds of projects would be beneficial to their own interests and direction of their studies. And so that, I would say, is one area, the field work that people did and the research they did. Just to give you some examples, for the gender and migration class that I taught in Alicante, actually the staff worked with us to set up a series of field trips, and we went to, there's a city called Benidorm that's just north of Alicante. It's a very international place with a lot of expats from all over, especially all over Europe, but other parts of the world as well. So we went there. We went as a group several times. There are vendors from West Africa, many of them from West African countries, living in Alicante and selling things on the along the water, on the the promenade along the water, and so we were able to meet individuals there, and learn about their experiences of migration, and then students did individual projects with people around different transnational aspects of their lives. So refugees, migrants, people interviewed, as I said, like some expats who were from other parts of, there were some people from the US, people from all over Europe living in that area. So those were the kinds of projects they could do there. And then in the gender and culture class that I taught in Basque Country, I remember that there was one student who did this really interesting oral history with an elder in the community who had lived through several different political regimes, and so she was able to do an oral history talking about experiences of gender under different political structures over time. So I think that, you know, these are the kinds of projects that you know, we would love to do in any setting, but obviously the opportunities when you're in a study abroad setting are that much more expansive.
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what Debbie said. My USAC class was relatively short, so I didn't have them do research projects in the same way, though. I you know, would have been nice to be able to do that. But and I also taught an anthropology course, gender and culture, with a focus on Latin America. And I think one of the things that was so, you know, so enriching for me and the students was to talk about issues in the anthropology or social science of gender in the classroom, about how we, you know, how gender norms and gender identities are culturally constructed, and then get to experience gender, the cultural construction of gender in a context that was very different from where most of the students had grown up in the United States. So it was, you know, and it was, I do, and this is kind of to link the last topic to this one. One of the things that USAC did was the resident director did a wonderful orientation the first day that everybody was there about, you know, just kind of the practicalities of daily life, of living in Heredia, and then also, you know, also kind of norms of gendered interactions and dating and what to expect when you're out socializing. And I think the students really appreciated that. And that was just kind of the practical side, and then we had the academic side, and it was great to be able to experience that. You know, we on field trips, or the students would come back to class and say, like, oh, remember we talked about this in class. And then I was out yesterday afternoon, and I noticed in terms of how people were interacting in this group, this kind of gender dynamic going on. So it was a wonderful opportunity to get to kind of live through some of what we were talking about in class.
Now, is there anything in particular that you wish you would have known about teaching abroad before you went, other than that you should have done it sooner?
That's my main. I think Dr. Shapiro said that, and yeah, that's for me. That's, well, I don't know. I'll think about it. Maybe there's more.
I just want to say you know, I had colleagues at other universities who kind of have led their own study abroad trips, where they kind of design their own program, and they take 20 students to Indonesia and do kind of and honestly, that sounded so daunting to me. Like, great, but also the logistical challenges, the organizing everything was so difficult that I was interested in it theoretically, but not practically. Like, oh no, I don't think I could ever do that. So for me, just working with USAC was the perfect way to do it, because USAC is so well organized. And so I could focus on what I do best, which is teaching. I didn't have to do all the logistical arrangements. I didn't have to, you know, USAC took care of everything. So I could really just focus on developing a class that would work well in that environment and for that time period. So for me, it was perfect. So I don't think I just compared to talking with, you know, again, colleagues at other universities who've done different kinds of study abroad programs or led different kinds of study abroad programs, I would absolutely always vote to go with USAC, definitely.
I share what my colleagues were expressing. I would add, and I don't know what the policies are, but I would encourage students to do 2 semesters abroad. 1 semester is fabulous. But one thing I observed is by the end of the first semester, students are really making great progress in their language and other knowledge acquisitions, and they want to stay. So Justice, is that something that's easy to do? Can students do 2 semesters?
They can, yes. We do have year-long options, and sometimes we do have students who do a semester and then decide that they want to stay on for another semester, and we are always happy to work with students and make those options possible whenever we can. Yeah.
Okay, well then I'll add one more comment. One advice for students who are thinking of this: if you're very serious, if one of your goals is really to learn the language, definitely do at least 2 semesters. But also, before you go, the more you study at home, the better, the more quick your progress will be. It's really exponential. The work you do before you go will be rewarded the minute you step off the plane. So I would say study as much as you can. And then when you go, you'll be like a plant being watered at, and you'll just blossom beautifully. That's my linguistic suggestion. And I can tell yeah.
Yeah, and you once again have anticipated my next question, which is my final question for each of you. But what advice would you give to a student who's considering studying abroad?
Do it. Absolutely. Just do it. You will not regret it. I mean, you will absolutely not regret it. Yeah, I'll think of something better to say, but that's my first piece of advice.
I think also the Dr. Stiles mentioned homestays. I know that on the programs I was on, some students were doing that and some were living in apartments. And I understand that, a homestay may not be the best fit for everyone, but I think in terms of language acquisition, that's obviously, can be really beneficial in advancing your language skills. That is an experience that I've had when I was studying abroad. And also I worked with a volunteer program for a year called World Teach in Ecuador. I did that after undergrad and before graduate school. And that was a similar situation where I lived with a family for a period of time, and it was just incredibly beneficial, and learned the language in a way that I never really could have in only a classroom setting. And I think the other thing is to take advantage of all the USAC programming. It was amazing. Actually, my family also came with me. So my partner and my daughter were with me, which that was another thing that was just so, facilitated so well by USAC. And in terms of finding housing and that kind of thing, and just being really welcoming. And we did go on all of the sort of field trips and excursions and lectures, attended the lectures and things like that. And I have these like really vivid memories. Like, for example, in Alicante, we went to Elche, which is a UNESCO site. It's a date palm grove that's been, where dates were have been cultivated for centuries. That was amazing. We also went when we were in San Sebastian. We went on a hike in the Basque Pyrenees that led us through. We crossed the border into France and Spain multiple times on this hike, which is just, a really amazing experience. I mean, literally the arrow, like this way to France and this way to Spain, So I think that those opportunities are just something that I would suggest that all students take advantage of through the USAC program, because they're just really memorable.
I'd like to add two comments. One, and this will sound very pragmatic, but I know one has to be pragmatic. This is your education. Your future employers or your future graduate school admissions committees like this very much. And it gives you an advantage for all these future applications because it suggests that you've learned things that a lot of students haven't. Just by having participated in an overseas program, the person looking at your CV will think, well, this suggests a higher level of maturity, an intellectual openness, and maybe even some tangible skills. So it's really win-win. It's such a rewarding, fun, mind-opening experience, but it actually plays well for your futures also. And I say that as my colleagues have been, we've sat on these committees. We know what professional schools like, and they like this type of stuff. And I as a final point, one thing that always impresses me so deeply is how kind people are to visitors, to whichever country you're visiting. People are kind and they help you. And that makes a world of difference in every way.
Yeah, I have another little comment to add. I agree with everything Dr. Bain and Dr. Shapiro said. And I think kind of along the lines of doing a homestay, if it'll work for you. When I was an undergrad studying abroad, homestay wasn't an option, unfortunately. And I remember regretting it at the time. I was just living, it was fun. I was living in an apartment with, mostly other Americans and one woman from Ireland, but I would have preferred, staying in a home. But make friends with the other USAC students, but make friends with the students at the university. I think that USAC did a great job on the program I was on of setting up activities for students to get to know the Costa Rican students, for the American students on USAC to get to know the Costa Rican students. And I think that take advantage of those opportunities. It will help, making friends beyond your USAC cohort or classmates is really key. If you can find ways to do that, it'll be very enriching, along the same lines as, living with a family, doing a homestay if you can. Again, practically speaking, it will certainly help your language acquisition, but also those, that's part of the growth, and part of the opening the mind and expanding the worldview is building those lasting friendships, hopefully with new people.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, all three of you, so much for your insightful responses. It's been a wonderful chance hearing about your experience and the wonderful experiences your students have had. At this point, we'd love to open it up to our audience. If we have any questions for our three panelists, we would love to take those now. Any questions out there for our wonderful panelists?
Wait, I see one in the chat. Let's see.
Yep, we do have a chat. The question is, what advice would you give to someone who is concerned about the language barrier?
Can I respond to that?
Please.
Well, there are two ways. There were two ways to look at that. There's a lot of Anglophone competence out there in the world. People in Europe and Asia actually speak English quite well. I mean, to a degree that's really, really humbling. So that's actually generally not a problem. But if you end up, say, in a fairly isolated place, maybe in the countryside, it's even take me for example. I mean, I speak Chinese and Japanese, but there are parts of China where the languages are different. So, for example, Cantonese and Mandarin are fundamentally different. They're mutually unintelligible. So I've been in parts of China where people don't speak Mandarin. It's just not a problem. It's just not a problem. And I've actually cannot think of a single time and I've been in many environments where I don't speak the language, where I've been sort of obstructed by an inability to communicate. And this goes back to people's openness and kindness. And you'd be amazed at how much you can communicate. But the fact is, the world speaks English. It's a linguistic reality. That's my response. I'd like to hear from my colleagues.
Yeah, and I think USAC does a great job of steering students so students who maybe haven't done a lot of language study in college and want to study abroad anyway. USAC does have programs where you can take all of your classes in English. So I think that, again, I think USAC does a great job of making sure that language is not a barrier to getting to spend time abroad. If you are going on a language intensive program and are going to improve your Mandarin or your Spanish or whatever, I think that's fantastic. But there are other reasons to study abroad. And so if you're worried that, oh, they're all just language focused, they're not. My area of research is in East Africa, and I, got placed in the Costa Rica program, and I don't speak Spanish. I mean, like a teeny bit, but it was, and I was thrilled to be given the opportunity to teach there. But I had a very small class. 3 of the students had studied Spanish. I think 1 was bilingual, and 1 student had never studied Spanish at all and had an amazing time. So I think, that's something to talk about with the USAC program officers here about which programs, what your goals are. If you're going to enhance your language study here or to begin new language study, or if you're going to experience life in a different country, but without necessarily focusing heavily on learning and acquiring a new language. I think USAC does a great job of kind of meeting students where they are.
Yeah, I also had, the students in my classes had a range of language background before in Spanish before getting there. And similarly, some were, had been raised in bilingual homes, for example, and others did not speak any Spanish and had never even taken a class in it until they, arrived there. So, and I think they all gained quite a bit kind of from wherever that starting point was for them in terms of language. And I also agree with what Dr. Shapiro is saying about the kind of, I don't, as an anthropologist, I don't like to necessarily stereotype, but I do think that the kind of generosity that you encounter abroad around things like language or just difference more generally it's often not something maybe that we see as much in our own country. And I think that that's something to keep in mind, is that, people are very gracious and generous and forgiving and are not, are going to be helpful rather than kind of judging your language ability or not. So, and, I was also thinking about the fact that in terms of language, the courses, and I assume this, or actually, I don't know if this was the case for all the visiting professors, but, the courses I taught were in English. But we did go through these different field trips and visits with NGOs and obviously research in different settings. There were times when we were in Spanish speaking, where maybe the person we were visiting with did not speak very much English, but it always kind of worked out. I mean, in some cases I was kind of interpreting as best I could, and those kinds of things. But I think that again, the kind of graciousness that everyone extends goes a long way.
Justice, could I ask Carolyn, is there a country or a site that you're contemplating that you'd like to share with us? East Asia, excellent. Well, you've come to the right place. Are you interested in China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, Taiwan? Why, listen, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Why don't you unmute yourself? That'd be great.
Sure. Well, I will reveal that I have studied abroad before on a faculty-led program, but it's something that kind of always comes to mind with traveling, studying abroad again, kind of that fear of being somewhere where you don't know any language. And so just trying to put out those feelers and see people's thoughts and experiences with that.
So, well, I know that Professor Stiles has been to Thailand and Chiang Mai. So when you say Southeast Asia, are you thinking of Vietnam or where are you thinking about?
My first thought would be maybe Thailand. I think maybe Vietnam, but still kind of coming through, thinking of different ideas.
I think that both those places would be fantastic. Vietnam, Thailand's amazing. Vietnam is also unbelievably dynamic right now. Vietnam's a fascinating place to visit. So I would say go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I'll just, I did visit the Chiang Mai program. I don't know, do we have a Vietnam program? Does USAC have Vietnam program? But the Chiang Mai program was wonderful. And none of the students that I met they were all studying Thai, but thanks, Alyssa. But none of the students I met, the USAC students, consider themselves proficient at all in Thai yet. So their classes were in English and they were studying, I think they were all enrolled in first or second semester Thai, but they were, so they were learning, and what better way to learn than being in Chiang Mai, but they were all doing their coursework in English and absolutely loving the program. I heard nothing but rave reviews from the students in Chiang Mai. So it was just one. I would love to go back. One of the anthropology faculty actually taught for a semester. One of our archaeologists taught for a semester in Chiang Mai, and I think she had a great experience there. But wonderful city, wonderful program. The staff, I don't know, that was several years ago, so the staff, the resident director and staff might have changed in Chiang Mai, but what a fantastic program. It was just, I would love to go back. USAC people, I would love to go back to Chiang Mai as a visiting professor.
Well, speaking of going back, one of a question that we have is, what do you hear from students about the places that they would love to study abroad? And personally, where's your dream location to teach abroad next?
Ghana. I was hoping for Ghana when I applied pre-pandemic. So I actually have some colleagues I work in East Africa, but I've never been to West Africa. And I have a Ghanaian colleague who I've been working on some projects with. So I'd really love to be able to teach in Ghana and kind of further our research collaboration. So I mean, my list could go on and on. So I'm going to just be quiet and let the others speak.
Japan. I'd love to teach in Japan. Which, and of course, as for the other participants, Justice is a leading authority on Japanese language and history. So he's the go-to person for Japan.
And I'm actually really interested in going back to Spain. That is where I had applied. One thing that I've appreciated is I've been in touch with the staff from USAC after my time there. And I was really excited about that possibility of perhaps going back to one of the sites where I was before, or a different site in Spain. I also was really excited to see that there's a program now in Portugal. Although it might be, I think when I looked at the subjects, I'm not sure. I want to find out more about that, because I would love to have the experience of going to Portugal as well. And yeah, I was going to mention, there's like now a lot in the chat, but I think Tylo was asking about connecting with students and ways to reach students. And I did want to say that in my own experience of trying to decide where would be the best fit for applying as a visiting professor, I found the USAC website so helpful, and so just a really great way to get a sense of what those programs were like, what the communities were like, what the the emphasis that would be in the classes at the different places. So I think those videos and the photographs and information that are on the website are so helpful. It was helpful for me as a faculty member, but I would imagine, from a student perspective, it would be especially so.
Yeah, I think I saw Sabrina Harris is here in the chat, but pre-Costa Rica, I was actually scheduled to go to Bangalore to teach one summer, but I had to withdraw, unfortunately, because my mother-in-law got very ill. And so we didn't get a chance to go, but that I've heard wonderful. Well, I was very excited to go on that program, and that would be, yes, my list is long of all the USAC programs I'd like to teach in, but I would like the opportunity to be able to go back to that one as well too.
Oh yeah, I forgot that I also had a family situation that prevented me from going to Cuba, but I was lined up to go to Cuba, which I don't know if you still are running that program, but that also just seems like such a exceptional sort of possibility of experience for our students. I think, to be able to do a study abroad in that setting. I have a lot of colleagues who work in Cuba, either are Cuban and are working at teaching at universities there, or are from other countries especially throughout the Americas, and who do their research and work there. And that also, I'd like to go there. Now I'm just kind of thinking about, it's going to take a while to go to all these places I want to go. So.
Excuse me. Very true. Very true. Well, if we don't have any other questions for our wonderful panelists, I would like to extend my thanks once again for you generously sharing your time and your experience with us. And I'll turn it back over to Tylo to wrap us up.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, to the wonderful participants that came and listened to this amazing panel. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us here at the panel. We really appreciate your guys' insight. And I think, the most glowing review of USAC we possibly could have asked for, potentially. So we really appreciate all the time and effort you guys put into this presentation. For anyone else who's who's viewing this presentation today, if you have any questions, please feel free to go to our website at usac.edu, or you can reach out to us via email. Our email is studyabroad@usac.edu, so very easy. But thank you again so much. Everyone have a great rest of your day. And we look forward to getting you abroad with us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Really nice to see everybody.
Bye-bye. Good
I
to
hope
see you.
that- It's good
Great
to
to
see
see
you.
you.